Hey, welcome back, everybody. Today is Wednesday, November 13th. Last class on Monday, we wrapped up Chapter 9. Chapter 9 homework is posted now. It is due next Monday at 11:55, so you can see the questions here that are going to be due next Monday. So just make sure everyone sees that and gets that in. Today we're going to be starting Chapter 10, Social Networks, Auctions, and Portals. My plan is to still get through this chapter by Friday. I don't think it's going to be any problem. It's a shorter chapter. Both chapters 10 and 11 are a little more short than the other ones have been, so it shouldn't be a problem there. The learning objectives for chapter 10 are going to be to explain the difference between a traditional social network and an online social network. Describe the different types of social networks and online communities and their business models. Describe the major types of auctions, their benefits and costs, and how they operate. Understand when to use auctions in a business. And describe the major types of internet portals. Understand the business models of portals. So these are the learning objectives for this chapter. So in this chapter, we're going to discuss social networks, auctions, and portals, obviously. So what do social networks, auctions, and portals all have in common? They're all based on feelings of shared interest and self-identification. And it's kind of like a sense of a community. Social networks and online communities are going to attract people with shared interests. It's going to have people of the same ethnicity, same gender, same religion, same political views, shared interests, as I said before. These interests could consist of vacations or sports or hobbies, whatever it might be. So we get started on page 385, section 10.1, social networks and online communities. The internet was designed originally as a communications medium to connect scientists and computer science departments around the continental United States. If you recall from earlier in the semester, we talked about how these first computers were used for educational purposes to link people at different universities. So once again, we're seeing that again. Now, the early internet was the first virtual communities. The first articles and books on the new electronic communities began appearing in the mid to late 1980s. The Well was one of the earliest of these online communities. It was formed in San Francisco in 1985 by a small group of people who once shared a 1,800-acre commune in Tennessee. It's now part of Salon.com, an online community and magazine. Now, with the development of the web in the early 1990s, millions of people began obtaining internet accounts and web email, and the community building impact of the internet was strengthened. By 2012, 157 million Americans and 1.4 billion people worldwide belong to online social networks. Now, currently, social network participation is one of the most common usages of the internet. Roughly 2/3 of all internet users in the United States, somewhere around 158 million Americans, use social networks on a regular basis. So what is an online social network exactly? How do we define an online social network? And how is it any different from an offline social network? One study examined 94 different sociological definitions of community and found 4 areas of agreement. These 4 areas consist of a group of people, shared social interaction, common ties among members, and people who share a certain area for a certain period of time. So these are all social networks, or the characteristics. Social networks do not necessarily have shared goals or purposes or intentions. But social networks can be balanced or can be in places where people just hang out or share space and communicate. Now, an online social network is an area online where people who share common ties can interact with one another. So obviously the internet is going to remove the geographic and time limitations of offline social networks. So the growth of social networks and online communities: Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Google+, Pinterest, and Tumblr are all examples of popular online communities. Social networks originally attracted mostly young internet users, but today social networks are not just about teens and college students anymore. A much larger audience is now taking participation in these social networks, with older people being included in it. Actually, more than 50% of Facebook's users are over the age of 35. Now, while Facebook and Twitter dominate the news, a new kind of social network is appearing and growing much faster than Facebook with respect to unique visitors and subscribers. These new sites are attracting marketers and advertisers as well. Pinterest is a good example, which is a visually oriented site that allows users to create their tastes and preferences expressed in visual arts. So Pinterest is pretty much like a visual blog for the most part. That's the best way to think of Pinterest. The number of unique visitors is just one way to measure the influence of a site. Time on site is another important metric that can be used. Obviously, as we said earlier in this semester, the more time people spend on a site, the more time to display ads and generate revenue. Facebook is 3 times more addictive than other top sites on the web. The amount of advertising revenue generated by sites is the ultimate metric for measuring the business potential of websites and brands. Social network sites are the fastest growing form of internet usage, but they're not as powerful as the traditional search engines in terms of ad dollars generated. Subscribers do not go to social network sites to seek ads for relevant products. So once again, we're seeing this trend here. Ads are not as popular, or not generating as much revenue on these social network sites as opposed to these search engine sites, because obviously the whole purpose of going to these social network sites is to be social and not to shop. Whereas when you go to these portal sites such as Google or Yahoo, usually you are looking for something in particular, not necessarily maybe to buy, but you are on there to search for something nonetheless. So that's a better place for them to catch these consumers or potential customers' eyes. So turning social networks into businesses. Early social networks had a difficult time raising capital and revenues. Today's top social network sites are now learning how to monetize their huge audiences. Early on, these social network sites relied primarily on subscriptions, but today most social networks rely on advertising or the investments of venture capitalists. LinkedIn is going to be an exception to this rule. LinkedIn offers free memberships to individual job seekers, but instead charge professional recruits and businesses for premium services. So the businesses and professional recruiters are the ones that are going to be paying for LinkedIn. Social networks have had profound impact on how businesses operate, communicate, and serve their customers. The most visible business firm use of social networks is as marketing and branding tools. So marketing and branding is what they're using these social network platforms for. That's what these businesses, the main focus is. More than 90% of the Fortune 500 companies have Facebook pages that have been established. These Facebook pages allow fans to follow the businesses and its products, and even share opinions with the company and even other fans. More than 80% of corporations have Twitter feeds for this purpose as well. Types of social networks and their business models. There are obviously many types and many ways of classifying social networks and online communities. The most popular social networks have adopted an advertising model, and of course, other networks have different revenue sources as well. Social networks have different types of sponsors and also different kinds of members. Some are created by firms such as IBM for the exclusive use of their sales force or other employees. Others are built for suppliers and resellers, and others are built by dedicated individuals for other similar persons with shared interests. Table 10.2 describes in greater detail the 5 generic types of social networks and online communities. The 5 types consist of general, practice, interest, affinity, and sponsored. Now let's just take a look at Table 10.2 for a second and look at these different types of social networks and online communities. On the left, it lists the type of social network or community. On the right, it gives a description of that relative, that social network and community. So let's just take a look here. General, the description of a general social network. Online social gathering place to meet and socialize with friends, share content, schedules, and interests. And some examples of this is Facebook, Pinterest, Tumblr, and MySpace. Practice is the second type of a social network. This is a social network of professionals and practitioners, creators of artifacts such as computer code or music. And some examples are just some plain folks, some musicians, the community, and LinkedIn, so businesses. Next type of social network it lists is the interest. The description of an interest community network. The community is built around a common interest such as games, sports, music, stock markets, politics, health, finance, foreign affairs, or lifestyles. And some examples of this is going to be edemocracy.org and Predict Wall Street, which is a stock market site. The next type of social network or community is that of an affinity network. The description of this is where community members who self-identify with demographic or geographic categories such as women, African Americans, or Arab Americans. Some examples of this is Black Planet and iVillage. The last type of a social network that is listed here in this table is that of a sponsored network or community. The description of the sponsored network or community is a network created by commercial, government, and not-for-profit organizations for a variety of purposes. Examples of this include Nike, IBM, and Cisco, and even political candidates. So once again, these are the 5 generic types of social networks and online communities. And once again, they are general, practice, interest, affinity, and sponsored. Social network features and technologies. Social networks have developed software applications that allow users to engage in a number of activities. Now, not all sites are going to have the same features. Some of these software tools are built into the sites, while others can be added by the user to their profile pages in the form as widgets. Now, what is the future of social networks? Social networking is currently one of the most popular online activities. Today's social network scene is highly concentrated with the top site of Facebook, and it's gathered about 50%, if not more, of the social network audience. Now, relative to other sites, Facebook's growth has slowed, while newer network sites have grown at a more rapid pace. So the success of Facebook is likely to attract some powerful competitors with their own ideas of how to build these online communities. Some examples of some companies that might go about building their online communities would be Google, Apple, or Amazon. Many Facebook users report network fatigue that is caused by spending too much time keeping up with their close friends and distant friends on many social networks. The fear that many users have about the privacy of their posts and content is also another factor, and people either not joining Facebook or just not engaging in the activity as much as they normally would have. The financial future of social networks is to become advertising and a sales platform. So the response rates to display ads on Facebook are far lower than that on portal sites like Yahoo or Google. And once again, we said this is because people are not going to these social network sites to look for goods or services. They're more so going there, to just to interact with their friends and see what's going on with people in the community. Next, we're on page 392, 10.2, online auctions. So these online auction sites are among the most popular consumer-to-consumer e-commerce sites on the internet. Once again, that's C2C. The market leader in C2C auctions is going to be eBay. eBay has 100 million active users in the United States and also over 300 million items that are listed on any given day on this medium. It also consists of over 18,000 different categories of items. In the United States alone, there are several hundred auction sites, some specializing in unique collectible products such as stamps and coins, others adapting to a more generalist approach in which almost any good can be found for sale. Established portals and online retail sites from Yahoo and MSN to JCPenney and Sam's Club are adding auctions to their sites. Defining and measuring the growth of auctions and dynamic pricing. So auctions are markets in which prices are variable and based on the competition among participants who are buying or selling products and services. Auctions are one type of dynamic pricing. Dynamic pricing is where the price of the product is going to vary. This depends directly on the demand characteristics of the customer and also the supply situation of the seller. Now, in dynamic pricing, merchants change their prices mainly based both upon their understanding of how much value the customer attaches to the product and also their own desire to make a sale. Likewise, customers change their offers to buy based on both their perceptions of the seller's desire to sell and their own need for the product. Now, in contrast, traditional mass market merchants generally use fixed pricing. Fixed pricing refers to one national price, and this price is listed everywhere for everyone. So just one price here, obviously by the name. Fixed pricing first appeared in the 19th century with the development of mass national markets and retail stores that could sell to a national audience. Computers and the development of the internet have contributed to a return on dynamic pricing. Now, with the internet, dynamic pricing can be conducted globally and at very low cost. The most widely known auctions are consumer-to-consumer auctions, known as C2C auctions. The auction house in the C2C environment is simply an intermediary market maker. This C2C auction provides a forum where consumers, buyers, and sellers can discover prices and also trade. Less well known are business-to-consumer auctions, known as B2C auctions. B2C auctions is where business owns or controls assets and uses dynamic pricing to establish the price. Now, established merchants on occasion use the B2C auctions to sell excess goods as well. Now, auctions are not limited to goods and services. They can also be used to allocate resources and bundles of resources among any group of bidders. Auctions, like all markets, are always allocating resources among independent agents. So why are auctions so popular? What are some of the benefits and costs of auctions? The internet is primarily responsible for the resurgence in auctions. The internet is going to provide a global environment and a very low fixed and operational cost for the aggregation of huge buyer audiences. These audiences are going to be composed of millions of consumers worldwide who can use a universally available technology to shop for the goods in which they desire. So let's get into some of the benefits of the auctions. So consumers, merchants, and society as a whole are going to derive a number of economic benefits from being able to participate in internet auctions. Now, some of these benefits are going to include liquidity. Liquidity refers to sellers being able to find willing buyers, and buyers can find sellers. So liquidity is just how liquid is an asset or an item, meaning how quick it can be sold. Price discovery. Buyers and sellers can quickly and efficiently develop prices for items that are difficult to assess, and particularly where the price depends on demand and supply and where the product is rare. Price transparency is another one of the benefits. Price transparency consists of the public internet auctions allowing everyone in the world to see the asking and bidding prices for items. Market efficiency. Auctions can and often do lead to reduced prices. Obviously, this leads to reduced profits for merchants, but it also leads to an increase in consumer welfare. This is also known as a great measure of market efficiency. Lower transaction costs. So online auctions obviously lower the cost of selling and purchasing products, and this is going to be a benefit to both merchants and consumers. Internet auctions are going to have very low transaction costs. So once again, this is going to benefit both the merchants and the consumers. Consumer aggregation is another benefit. This is where sellers benefit from large auction sites, the ability to aggregate a large number of consumers that are going to be motivated to purchase something in one market space. The benefit that's going to be listed here is that of network effects. Obviously, the larger an auction site becomes, in terms of visitors and products for sale, then the more valuable that market space becomes. It becomes more valuable because it's going to provide for everyone liquidity and several other benefits, such as lower transaction costs, higher efficiency, and better price transparency. Risks and costs of auctions for consumers and businesses. There are a number of risks and costs that are going to be involved in participating in these auctions. Obviously, anything where there's benefits, there's always going to be some risks or costs. So obviously, auction markets can fail, such as all markets at certain times can. Some of the most important risks and costs that we should note are delayed consumption costs. Internet auctions can go on for days, and shipping will take additional time. Monitoring costs. Participation in auctions requires your time to monitor bidding. Equipment costs. Internet auctions require you to purchase a computer system, pay for internet access, and learn complex operating systems. Also, trust risk is another big risk and cost of auctions. Online auctions are the single largest source of internet fraud. So obviously, by using auctions, it's going to increase your risk of experiencing a loss. And the last one listed here is the fulfillment costs. Typically, the buyer pays fulfillment costs of packing, shipping, and insurance. And usually in the physical store, these costs are going to be included in the retail price. So really nothing different here. Fulfillment costs is always going to be pushed up on to the consumer. Auction sites such as eBay have taken a number of steps to reduce consumer participation costs and trust risk. Auction sites attempt to solve the trust problem by providing a rating system in which previous customers rate sellers based on their overall experience with that merchant. This is helpful, but this solution does not always work. Auction fraud is the leading source of e-commerce complaints to federal law enforcement officials, so obviously this is still a big problem here. This is where I'm going to leave off for today. Bottom of page 394 with risks and costs. We're about halfway through this chapter, maybe a little over. So that's why I'm going to go ahead and just stop here. We'll pick back up on the bottom of page 394 with market maker benefits, auctions as an e-commerce business model on Friday, And we will go ahead and wrap up chapter 9, or I'm sorry, chapter 10. And we will also have chapter 10's homework posted by Friday, in which will be due next Friday at 11:55 p.m. And please do recall, chapter 9 homework has been posted last Monday, and it is due next Monday at 11:55 p.m. Once again, that's all for today. Thank you for your time, and see everyone on Friday.